Are you serious, Dad? I exclaimed, disbelief etched across my face. You're really kicking me out for him? It's not just that, Emily, Dad replied, his voice steady but lacking warmth. Kyle needs a stable environment. He's been through so much. You've got to understand. Stable environment? You mean letting him move in and taking my room? What about me? I shot back, crossing my arms defiantly. Mom stood off to the side, her face a mask of indecision. Sweetheart, Kyle is your brother. You should be supportive. Supportive? You mean accommodating. I don't even know him. I felt a mix of anger and hurt bubbling inside me. How could they just expect me to roll over and accept this? Kyle, my golden child half-brother, appeared in the doorway, flashing a smug smile. Hey, Em. It's just temporary, right? He leaned against the frame, his arms casually crossed, looking every bit the part of the favored child. Yeah, temporary until you decide to make it permanent, I bet, I muttered, glaring at him. Come on, it's not like I'm taking your stuff. You can still have your space. Just think of it as a family adjustment, Dad said, his tone softening. Family adjustment? You mean a family betrayal? I shot back, raising my voice. You've known about this for months and didn't tell me. Mom stepped forward. Emily, you need to be reasonable. Kyle's been struggling since your father and I split. This is a chance for him to get back on his feet. Or a chance for you to feel like you're doing something for him while throwing me to the curb, I retorted, my frustration boiling over. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Dad warned, his patience clearly wearing thin. You're almost 20. You can find your own place, figure things out. I can't believe this, I muttered under my breath, but the look in Dad's eyes made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. It's not the end of the world. Just take a breather, Kyle said, stepping further into the room. You could use a little adventure anyway. Think of it like going to college but at home. Adventure? You're such a clown, I scoffed, ignoring him completely. What do you even know about my life? Enough to know it's time for you to grow up, Dad interjected, his voice firm. Your mother and I are trying to help your brother, and I expect you to be a part of that. I'm not interested in being a part of it, I said, feeling tears of frustration welling in my eyes. This is messed up, and you know it. Just give it a chance, Mom pleaded, her voice almost a whisper. We're still a family. We can work through this. Sure, let's just throw my life away so Kyle can have a little stability, I said, rolling my eyes. What's next? You'll expect me to babysit him too? Why not? Kyle chimed in with a grin. I could use a babysitter who can drive. I shot him a glare. You're unbelievable. Maybe I am. But at least I'm not making this difficult for everyone, he shot back. Enough. Dad's voice boomed, cutting through our bickering. Emily, I need you to pack your things. I'll help you find a place if that's what you want. But we're doing this for Kyle. You're not the only one who matters here. With that, I stormed out of the room, my heart racing. I could hear Dad and Kyle continuing to argue behind me. My heart was heavy, the weight of betrayal sinking in. Weeks passed, and the tension in our house reached unbearable levels. I found a small apartment close to campus, and with a part-time job, I managed to pay the bills. My world had shrunk down to classes, work, and an empty room that felt increasingly lonely. Hey, a text from my best friend Sarah Reed. Want to grab coffee? I miss you. Sure, I replied, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe a little normalcy would help. As we settled into a corner booth, Sarah looked at me with concern. How are you holding up? I can't believe your dad just tossed you aside like that. I don't know, Sarah. I'm mad, you know? I said, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. It feels like I don't even exist anymore. I keep thinking about how he used to say family comes first. Clearly, he meant Kyle, she said, her voice laced with anger. Have you talked to him since you left? No, I admitted. I don't think I want to. He didn't even try to reach out. That's not surprising. He's probably too busy playing the golden child, she said, her eyes narrowing. But you deserve better than this, I thought family meant something. Apparently, It's only about who can pull at Dad's heartstrings the most, I replied bitterly. Want me to go over there and give him a piece of my mind? Sarah offered, a mischievous glint in her eye. No, don't. I'll handle it, I said, sighing. Maybe I just need to let it go. They've made their choice. Back in my apartment, I tried to fill the void with school and work. But every night, I found myself staring at my phone, contemplating whether to reach out to my dad. But the thought of being rejected again made my heart ache. Then, one evening, my phone rang. The caller ID read Dad. Hello? I answered, my voice guarded. Emily, I need to talk to you, Dad said, his tone serious. What is it? I replied, heart racing. It's about Kyle. He's in some trouble, he admitted, his voice tight with worry. What kind of trouble? I felt the cold dread wash over me. He's made some bad choices, and I think he needs your help, Dad said, his words tumbling out in a rush. What kind of help? I pressed, suddenly feeling the weight of the conversation. Let's just say he needs you to cover for him. If you don't, it could end badly for him. Cover for him? I repeated incredulously. You've got to be kidding me. After everything? I know it's a lot to ask, but he's your brother. We can't let him go to jail, Dad pleaded. I clenched my fists, anger boiling over. You want me to lie for him? Just like that? Please, Em. You're all we have, he said, desperation evident in his voice. What happened, Dad? I demanded, feeling my heart race. Just come over. I'll explain everything, he urged. I'll think about it, I replied, ending the call, feeling torn between anger and concern. As I stared out of my apartment window, I realized I was about to be faced with a choice that would change everything. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone after the call with Dad. The weight of his request felt heavy in the air, thick with tension and unspoken fears. The thought of lying for Kyle, a boy I barely knew, felt like betraying myself. But what if he was in serious trouble? I couldn't ignore that possibility. Moments later, I texted Sarah. Dad just called. Kyle's in trouble. Her response was immediate. What kind of trouble? I hesitated, then typed back, he wants me to lie for him. I don't even know what he did. Are you going to? She replied, her concern palpable through the screen. I don't know, I admitted. I'm still trying to process everything. After some thought, I decided to go to Dad's house. I couldn't ignore this, not when a part of me still felt obligated to help. I grabbed my keys and headed out, the cold evening air hitting me as I stepped outside. As I approached Dad's house, I could see the lights glowing warmly from inside. The juxtaposition of my cold exterior and the cozy atmosphere inside struck me. I knocked hesitantly, and Dad opened the door almost immediately. Emily, thank you for coming, he said, his expression a mix of relief and anxiety. Where's Kyle? I asked, scanning the interior for signs of him. Living room. He's a bit shaken up, Dad replied, leading me inside. The living room was filled with an uneasy silence. Kyle sat on the couch, his face buried in his hands. When he looked up, I was shocked to see fear etched into his features, something I had never seen before. Emily, he said, his voice shaky. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. What happened? I crossed my arms, trying to project more strength than I felt. I got involved with the wrong crowd, he admitted, his gaze shifting to the floor. I was trying to fit in, you know? But it backfired. What did you do? I pressed, feeling a mix of anger and concern. There was a party. I took some stuff. I didn't think it was that serious. But now, the police are involved, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Dad jumped in. He was at a party where there was underage drinking and drugs, They found his fingerprints on a bag that wasn't his, but they're trying to pin the whole thing on him. Wait, so you're telling me the police think he was dealing drugs? I asked incredulously. Kyle looked up, eyes wide with fear. I swear I wasn't. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I panicked, and I didn't call you because I thought I could handle it. But I can't. So now you want me to lie? To say it was mine? I shook my head, my heart Keep quiet about it, he pleaded. If I get caught, I'll have a record. I could end up in jail, and Dad's already had to deal with so much. Emily, please, Dad added, his voice strained. Kyle's made mistakes, but he's still our family. We can't let this ruin his life. Your family? You kicked me out for him. You don't get to pick and choose who your family is, I snapped, feeling the walls closing in around me. Listen, Dad said, frustration creeping into his voice. This isn't just about you. I'm trying to protect Kyle from making a terrible mistake that could haunt him forever. Protect him by asking me to lie? I threw my hands up in disbelief. What kind of protection is that? I've made my share of mistakes, too. We're all human, Kyle said, his eyes pleading. I need your help. Just this once. I felt torn, caught between my anger and the reality of what Kyle was facing. And if I refuse? What happens then? They'll take me in, Kyle said, his voice breaking. You can't let that happen. You know what they'll do to me. Do you think lying will actually help? What if they find out the truth? I challenged, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Dad said, desperation creeping into his voice. Please, This is the only way. You can help him. I looked back and forth between Dad and Kyle, feeling my heart rate spike. You both need to understand, this is not just about saving Kyle. It's about making sure that I don't have to carry this burden alone. If I do this, I'll be complicit in whatever mess you both created. Maybe I deserve to face the consequences, Kyle said quietly, his bravado melting away. But I don't want to. I'm scared, I didn't mean to get into this mess. I felt a pang of sympathy. Despite everything, I knew what it felt like to be scared and alone. But did that mean I had to be the scapegoat? Just think about it, okay? Kyle pleaded, his voice low. If it was me in your shoes, I'd do anything for you. Anything? I echoed, feeling a wave of anger surge within me. Anything includes lying to the police? Covering for your bad choices? Please, Emily, Dad urged, his voice cracking. This is about Kyle's future. He has potential, we can't let this ruin it. Don't you see? I said, stepping back. You're asking me to give up my integrity. I can't just let it slide. The room fell into a heavy silence, the gravity of the situation pressing down on us. Can you give me some time to think? I finally said, my voice quieter. Of course, Dad replied, his expression one of resignation. But we need to act fast. I turned to leave, my heart heavy with the weight of their expectations. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much bigger mess. Back at my apartment, I felt numb. I sank into my bed, staring at the ceiling. Every part of me was screaming to say no, to walk away from their chaotic lives. But then I thought about Kyle, the uncertainty in his eyes, the fear that echoed in his voice. Just as I began to drift off, my phone buzzed. Hey, you okay? Sarah texted. Not really. Just had a crazy night. I'll fill you in tomorrow, I typed back. Let me know if you need anything. Seriously. I stared at the message, contemplating whether to confide in her. But what would I even say? That I was being pressured to lie for my half-brother whom I barely knew? The next day dragged on, filled with classes that felt meaningless. I couldn't concentrate, my mind replaying Dad's words and Kyle's desperation. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to talk to someone. I dialed Sarah's number. Hey, what's up? She answered, her voice bright and cheery. I need to talk. Can we meet? I said, my voice heavy with worry. Of course. Let's grab lunch. We met at our usual cafe, and as soon as I sat down, Sarah sensed my distress. What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. It's about Kyle and my dad, I said, taking a deep breath. They want me to lie for him. He's in trouble with the police. Her expression shifted to one of concern. What did he do? I explained everything, feeling the weight of my words. And now they expect me to cover for him. I don't even know him, Sarah. Have you made a decision? She asked, her brows furrowed. I'm leaning towards no, but I feel so guilty. What if something happens to him? What if I could help? I ran a hand through my hair, frustration bubbling up. You can't carry this burden for him. If he made choices that led him here, he needs to face the consequences, she advised gently. You have to look out for yourself too. I know, but what if I'm the only person who can help him? I said, my heart torn. Helping him doesn't mean lying for him. It means supporting him while he learns to take responsibility, Sarah said, her voice firm yet compassionate. I guess you're right. But what if Dad gets angry? He's so set on this idea of protecting Kyle, I replied. Let them be mad. It's not your responsibility to fix their problems. You're not their scapegoat, she asserted, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Thanks, Sarah. I needed that, I said, taking a deep breath. As the afternoon light filtered through the cafe window, I felt a sense of clarity beginning to wash over me. Maybe it was time to take a stand, not just for myself, but for Kyle too. That evening, I found myself back at Dad's house. As I walked through the door, Kyle was sitting on the couch, looking more anxious than before. Hey, Emily, he said, his voice strained. Can we talk? I asked, my tone firm. Yeah, of course, he replied, sitting up straighter. I've thought about what you and Dad said, I began, feeling my heart race. And I'm not going to lie for you, Kyle. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. What do you mean? I thought you'd help me. I can't cover for you. Lying isn't going to fix your problems, it's just going to make them worse, I said, holding my ground. You need to face the consequences of your actions. Dad stepped into the room, concern etched on his face. Emily, you don't understand. No, Dad. You don't understand. You can't just push me to sacrifice my integrity to protect someone who's not even trying to change. I shot back. Kyle looked between us, his face a mixture of anger and despair. You don't get it. I'm scared. I messed up. And you need to own that, Kyle, I said, my voice rising. That's the only way you'll ever grow. Emily, Dad began, but I raised my hand to stop him. No. This stops now. I'm not going to be part of this cycle. You both need to take responsibility for your actions. Kyle's shoulders sagged, and he buried his face in his hands. What if I go to jail? I can't do that. I won't survive. You might surprise yourself, I said, trying to soften my tone. But this is your chance to make it right. You can't keep running away from your mistakes. I'm really scared, he admitted, tears streaming down his cheeks. I know. But I'll be here for you, even if I can't lie for you. You'll need support when this comes out, I said, my heart aching for him despite my anger. Dad stood silent, a mix of relief and frustration crossing his face. We'll figure this out, Kyle. Together. Together, I echoed, feeling a strange sense of unity begin to form despite the chaos. As I left Dad's house that night, I felt a glimmer of hope. I couldn't control what Kyle did, but I could choose to stand firm in my convictions. Perhaps in confronting the truth, we could find a way forward, a way to heal that didn't involve deception. The next few days felt like a blur. I kept replaying my confrontation with Kyle and Dad in my mind. I knew I had made the right decision, but the aftermath weighed heavily on my shoulders. Kyle was facing serious consequences, and part of me worried that I was abandoning him in his time of need. As I went about my daily routine, I couldn't shake the anxiety lingering over our family. Would Kyle come clean? Would Dad finally realize that his attempts to protect him were doing more harm than good? I had no answers, only questions swirling like autumn leaves in the wind. On Saturday, I received a text from Kyle. Can we talk? I need your help. My heart raced. I had expected him to be angry with me, but the vulnerability in his message made me reconsider. I responded, sure. When? Now? At the park? He replied. I agreed, feeling a mix of apprehension and hope. The park was a familiar spot for us, a place filled with memories from childhood, where we'd played together before life complicated everything. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, trying to calm my racing heart. When I arrived, I spotted Kyle sitting on a bench, his hands nervously fidgeting. He looked up as I approached, and for the first time, I noticed how fragile he seemed. Hey, I said softly, sitting down beside him. Hey, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Thanks for coming. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle. I've been thinking. You were right, he said, his eyes downcast. I need to take responsibility for my actions. I can't keep pretending like everything is okay. That's a good start, I encouraged, feeling a spark of hope. What do you plan to do? I'm going to go to the police and tell them the truth, he said, taking a deep breath. I can't keep lying. It's not fair to you or Dad. I just don't want to end up in jail. You're doing the right thing, Kyle, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. It's going to be scary, but it's necessary. You need to own up to what happened. I know, he replied, his voice trembling. I don't want to let anyone down. Especially Dad. You're not letting anyone down. You're being honest, and that's what matters, I reassured him. This could be a turning point for you, a chance to show everyone that you're willing to change. Do you think he'll be mad at me? Kyle asked, his brow furrowing. I think he'll be upset at first, but I also think he'll understand. This is about your future, Kyle. You need to think about what you want for yourself, I said, feeling a sense of urgency in my words. I want to get better. I want to be someone I can be proud of, he said, determination starting to fill his eyes. Then let's do this together. You don't have to face it alone, I said firmly. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his decision hanging in the air. I felt a glimmer of pride for Kyle. He was finally stepping up. Can you come with me? He asked suddenly, looking at me with hopeful eyes. I don't think I can do it alone. Of course, I'll be there, I replied without hesitation. Thanks, Em. I really appreciate it, he said, relief flooding his voice. Later that afternoon, we arrived at the police station, and I could feel the tension in the air. The building loomed over us, its sterile exterior mirroring the anxiety in Kyle's eyes. Are you ready? I asked, squeezing his hand for support. He took a deep breath, nodding slowly. As ready as I'll ever be. We walked in together, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as we approached the front desk. Kyle's hands were clammy, and I could see his knees shaking slightly. Can I help you? The officer behind the desk asked, looking up with a professional demeanor. Kyle opened his mouth, but no words came out. I could feel the fear radiating from him, so I stepped in. My brother wants to turn himself in, I said, my voice steady. The officer raised an eyebrow, glancing between us. What's the situation? Kyle was at a party where drugs were present, and he's willing to admit his involvement, I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. Is that so? The officer's tone shifted slightly. We'll need to take a statement. Come with me. Kyle's face went pale, but I squeezed his hand again, offering a reassuring smile. You can do this. As we followed the officer down a long hallway, Kyle looked around nervously. The station was a hive of activity, officers coming and going, phones ringing, and the faint echo of distant voices. When we reached a small interview room, Kyle sat down, his eyes darting around the sterile environment. The officer closed the door and sat across from us, his expression serious. Okay, Kyle. Tell me what happened, the officer said, pulling out a notepad. Taking a deep breath, Kyle began to recount the events of that night, his voice trembling but growing steadier as he spoke. I could see the burden of guilt lift slightly from his shoulders with each confession. I didn't mean to get involved. I was just trying to fit in, and then everything spiraled out of control. I want to take responsibility for what I did, he said, his voice finally gaining strength. Good. Owning up to your mistakes is the first step, the officer said, writing furiously. We can work with you on this. As Kyle continued to speak, I felt a swell of pride for him. He was no longer the scared boy I had known, he was taking charge of his life. After what felt like an eternity, the officer finished taking notes. Thank you, Kyle. We'll look into this further, but it sounds like you're making the right choice. Does that mean I won't go to jail? Kyle asked, hope flickering in his eyes. It depends on the specifics of your involvement. You've taken a crucial first step, but we'll need to investigate further, the officer replied. Thank you, Kyle said, his voice filled with relief. As we walked out of the station, the weight that had once pressed down on us felt a little lighter. You did it, I said, smiling at him. I'm proud of you. I can't believe I actually went through with it, Kyle said, his face lighting up. I feel free. Like I finally let go of this huge burden. I knew you could do it, I said, feeling a sense of warmth spread through me. This is just the beginning, you know. You have a long way to go, but I'll be here to help you. Thanks, Em. Seriously, he said, his eyes glistening with gratitude. As we stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the park where we had first talked. In that moment, it felt like we were turning a new page, a chance to rebuild our lives and relationships, one step at a time. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. Kyle was under supervision, but he started attending counseling and support groups. Dad was surprisingly supportive, stepping up in a way I had never seen before. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, I received a text from Kyle. Can we meet? I want to thank you properly. Curious, I agreed. When I arrived at the park, Kyle was already waiting, a small box in his hands. What's this? I asked, eyeing it suspiciously. Open it, he urged, a grin spreading across his face. I lifted the lid to find a homemade dessert, my favorite chocolate chip cookies, still warm and gooey. You baked these? Yeah, with a little help from Dad, he said, looking a bit sheepish. I wanted to do something special for you. You were there for me when I needed it most, and I can't thank you enough. I felt a swell of warmth in my chest. Kyle, you didn't have to. But I wanted to. You've always been my sister, even when I didn't appreciate you, he said, sincerity shining in his eyes. I'm working on myself, and I hope I can make you proud. You already have, I replied, my heart full. As we sat on the bench, eating cookies and laughing about old memories, I felt a shift within me. This was the brother I had always wanted, someone who was willing to fight for his future, someone who was learning to own his mistakes. Perhaps, just perhaps, our family could find a way to heal from the cracks that had formed. In that moment, I realized that love doesn't always mean being perfect. Sometimes it's about being there for one another when it counts the most. And as the sun set over the park, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, growth, and the promise of a better tomorrow.